Oh, that's better.
Hello. Okay, so I reckon there's enough people here, and people seem to have stopped turning up. So we'll go. We'll go. If anyone wasn't sure, that was the music from the musical version of Terry Pratchett's "Only You Can Save Mankind," which almost no one has seen. So yes, without further ado, we're going to have a brilliant launch party today. Thank you all for coming. I really, really appreciate it. I'm going to hand you over to our hosts and compares who will guide you through today's proceedings. Please welcome onto the Zoom stage, Rachel and Jason from Discworld Monthly.
Oh!
Yay!
Oh, wonderful to see so many faces we recognise.
And loads we don't.
And loads we don't. It's absolutely fab to see a load of faces we don't know. It's unusual for us to spy people we don't actually know in the crowd. Of course, this evening is all about the new biography of Terry Pratchett, written by Marc Burrows, the man in blue. He's spent the last 18 months researching heavily the life of our favourite author. And of course, it's out today officially. So, you know, I hope you've all got a copy. We have ours, beautiful as it is. But of course, I got to read the very first draft way back last September, I think it was. And I'm going to be honest, I still haven't read the final draft. I let this man do that.
What's the final draft? I read the...
Oh, not quite final draft.
I read the Kindle version. I read it on PDF, which I think was almost the final draft, but I haven't actually read the book itself yet.
No, we looked at the pretty pictures, which of course, a lot of them are ours, which was really, really nice to see. Of course, tonight we're going to have a reading by Marc from the book. We're going to have a little chat with the cover artist, Andrea. And of course, there's going to be a quiz. So I hope you've all got paper and pen handy, because we're going to be challenging Marc to see if he really knows as much as he thinks he does.
Yeah, for someone who's claimed to be an expert, well, let's see how good he is. Some of you have done some of my quizzes before, so you know what level they're going to be. So.
And of course, many of you would have done Discworld Monthly's trivia every single month and found out just how difficult it can be.
There's a range of questions. I think some of them are relatively simple. Others, I suspect it'd be unlikely that many people will get some of them.
But, you know, if you do, and you happen to be the one person with more points than anybody else, we may find a competition prize for you.
Yeah.
We may.
We may.
Woo!
We know how much Andrew Neville loves our quizzes, don't we know, Andrew?
Go away, Rick. Go away, Jason.
Right, I'm going to hand you back to Marc, who I believe is going to do some talking.
Okay, hi. Thanks very much, guys. That was lovely, brilliant as always. I'm just going to hide myself because it's absolutely hideous to see yourself when you're trying to do anything else, and I get distracted like a canary. Oh no, that's not me being self-effacing. I'm just distracted by how handsome I am. So I'm just going to put that. So I've just and then welcome and thanks for Jason and Rachel for helping out with all of this. So what we're going to do is I'm going to do a reading from the book. I'm going to mute everybody if that's okay when I do the reading, just because otherwise I'm going to get put off. And and as we've seen already, I'm very easily distracted. I'm like a canary. So I do keep having to admit people. Hi, people. Hello, new people. Yeah. So I'm gonna mute people while I do a reading of the book. If that's okay with you guys. We're going to read chapter 3. So first of all, thank you very much for being interested. I don't know how many of you have got the book yet. If you've not, then please do buy it. If you buy it this week, there's a chance we could get into the bestsellers charts, and a very small chance, but apparently you only have to sell 500 copies in a quiet week to sneak into the bottom. And I'm all about sneaking into the bottom. So yeah, this is gonna. So, thank you very much. So, if you haven't bought it yet, then normally I'd say buy it from me because that way I get more money. But actually, this week it's more useful if you buy it from Amazon or a bookshop because if you buy it from me, that just doesn't count. Unfortunately, I mean, it can. If they catch you doing that, they literally disqualify you, which I think is poor form. So I'm gonna keep admitting people People are arriving. Hi, everybody who's still arriving. You're late, which is ridiculous. If this was a stand-up show, I would be asking you who you were, where you came from, and what your excuse was, and then doing some sort of humiliating banter. But I'm not going to do that because we are here for a warm and lovely reading of my book, and I don't want to alienate the audience right away. Hang on. Somebody says, Nick says, remove the waiting room. Oh, I can turn the waiting room off now. That's a good idea. No, does anybody know how to do that? somewhere in the settings. Hang on a minute. This is riveting television, isn't it?
Amazing.
General.
Billy, come on.
Participants.
Somewhere around here is a way of turning off the waiting room, but I don't know how, or possibly giving control to somebody else who does understand. I don't know how to do that either. Do you know what? I'm just going to keep admitting people, and then hopefully we'll be fine. So anyway, yes, I'm
going to Teresa's cat.
Yeah.
Cats are absolutely encouraged and approved, particularly if they've got their own Zoom cameras.
Way too stupid for that.
That would be amazing. So right, what we're going to do is I'm going to do a reading. I'm going to do a reading from chapter 3 of the book. So I'm going to have to do a quick story so far. First of all, so chapter 3 is the chapter that got me the job, because they asked for a sample chapter, and I was looking for which part of Terry's life would be the most interesting in order to read to get the job. And I didn't want to start at the beginning. It seemed obvious. I didn't want to start at the end because I thought emotionally I probably needed to run up before I tackled it. So I thought, which part of the story? So I decided to start with the part of the story where Terry gets a job as a journalist, which is something that fans know happened, but the details of which aren't always that forthcoming, and some of the details aren't what you may think they are. So that I thought was really interesting. So I wrote, I think we'll do the whole chapter. I reckon we've got time for that. So the story so far, Terry Pratchett was born, as you know, in 1948. He didn't particularly enjoy his school years, as you learn in chapter 1 and chapter 2. He went to school. He went to the local technical school, hated his headmaster, hated his lessons, but discovered reading and loved it. He'd had his first story published age 14. He discovered science fiction and fandom. He'd been to conventions, and he'd taken his GCSEs, which he'd done fine at. So we're going to pick up the story when he comes back to Wickham Tech to do his A-levels, which is chapter 3. So I am going to admit the last few people. Hang on, a few more people to admit, including Andrea, who we're interviewing later, so that's useful. And if anyone knows how to turn off the waiting room, please say so in the chat. And then we will, but down at the bottom, apparently, participants. I got that. It's too stressful. Is it under the security options? Enable waiting room. Okay, I can undo. Okay, brilliant. We've disabled the waiting room. People can now let themselves in and stop bothering me. So, right. Please do give. I'm going to mute everybody. So please say hello in the chat if you've got any questions at this point, or you want me, or something is going horribly wrong. But we're going to go with chapter 3 of the Magic of Terry Pratchett, if that's okay. Is that all right with everybody? Stop blabbering, Mark. Do the thing. Right, I'm going to mute everybody, and we'll get straight into it. So, Chapter 3, The Journalist's Apprentice. Terry returned to Wickham Tech after the summer break of 1965, unaware he was entering his final few weeks in full-time education. His dislike of school had turned into a simmering resentment, though the idea that he could bail on academia and throw himself into the real world wasn't one he was taking seriously just yet. He wasn't sure what awaited him on the other side of his A-levels, but it was unthinkable not to take them. Still, ideas about his future had begun to form, a professionally published story under his belt and several more in the school magazine, alongside the lessons in touch typing that his mother had paid for, had given him confidence in his abilities. Writing wasn't the only thing that he's good at, as he would later claim in an interview with the BBC. Footnote, this is not quite true. He's also a skilled artist and has sincere love and aptitude for technology. It was something he was very good at, and knowing this gave him a clear focus. All of those other vague ambitions, the astronomy and the electronics, had fallen to the wayside. Writing was the only way that he could see himself spending his life. Terry began to research a career in the written word. He read several books on the subject, because he always read a book when he needed to know something, and learned quickly that penning science fiction stories was unlikely to provide a reliable living. Luckily, his skill with words left another path available. In September, he wrote to the editor of his local newspaper, the Books Free Press, optimistically claiming he was going to graduate the following year with 3 A-levels. I was pretty certain I'd have at least passed history and English, he said later. And he asked for a job. And he asked if a job would be available in the summer. There's an idea that recurs in Discworld novels about the trousers of time. Those moments when 2 possible futures open up and you're forced to pick a leg. History bifurcates. Go one way and your life will be completely different from the other. The young Terry's only real trousers of time experience so far had been choosing High Wycombe Technical School over the local grammar. He would always claim it was one of his first real mistakes. He was 6 years older and now teetering on the edge of adulthood. The trousers had become much bigger and the stakes much higher. Against all biological and metaphysical expectation, another leg was about to open up. Arthur Church, the respected editor of the Books Free Press, replied almost immediately. He had no idea if a position would be available down the line, but the paper was looking for a trainee reporter right now. Would he be interested in interviewing for the role? Terry jumped at the chance. The interview took place on a Saturday afternoon. Terry, a man always keen to self-mythologise, would tell people he turned up in his school uniform. It's a curious detail. After all, the Pratchetts weren't so badly off that David couldn't have, that's Terry's dad, that's not named in this chapter, couldn't have owned a tie his son could borrow. And since it was a Saturday, it's not as if he was coming straight from class. That said, using your uniform for job interviews was common at the time, when not everyone owned a smarter get-up. Another Free Press alumni, Janice Raycroft, who would be mentored by Terry in the 70s, remembers attending her own school interview at the paper in her grammar school-approved skirt and school tie. Whatever his attire, the young writer clearly made an impression, receiving a job offer from Church on the spot. Terry was fond of telling people that his new boss had remarked, "I like the cut of your jib," usually adding that this was the last recorded use of the phrase in Britain, or this was the last time anyone was heard to say this without being arrested. 45 years later, during a lecture at Trinity College Dublin, he admitted he wasn't certain whether Church had ever really uttered that line at all, or if he'd added the detail himself to spice up the anecdote. The story had grown with the telling. Terry Pratchett's stories often did. The trousers of time had opened, probably somewhere in the fly. Should he endure another year of school and leave in the summer with a safety net of 3, or more likely 2 A-levels? Or roll the dice, turn his back on Wycombe Tech and see if he could cut it as a reporter? A decision was made substantially easier thanks to one last insult from headmaster Harry Ward. Terry had been appointed the school's student head librarian, an unpaid position which he, a self-described library boy, worked diligently at, staying behind every Thursday evening to tidy up and prepare books. Traditionally, the head librarian was also made a prefect, and having school prefect on your CV could be invaluable. It indicated a trustworthiness, someone who had gone above and beyond in their academic career. It could swing the balance on job offers and university placements. Ward was adamant that Terry Pratchett, a student who wrote weird fiction, had once been caught stealing an old encyclopedia out of a bin and brought in scurrilous magazines like Mad and Private Eye, would never become a prefect at his school. He prevented the appointment. Terry saw it as a wholly malicious act for which he never forgave his headmaster. In his 2010 speech at Trinity College, Terry claimed he walked into the school on Monday following his interview, handed back his textbooks and left, somewhat satisfyingly, via a visitor's entrance, which only teachers and prefects were allowed to use, and presumably visitors. The story has a neat symmetry and obeys what on Discworld is often called the law of narrative causality. The truth is likely a little less narratively tidy. For starters, David and Eileen Pratchett were on holiday at the time, and their son respected them far too much to make a decision without their approval. Besides which, at 17, he legally needed his father's consent to embark on an apprenticeship. On their return, Terry was surprised how quickly his sensible, practical parents came round to the idea. David was simply relieved that his son wasn't going to spend his life looking at the undercarriage of a motor car, which is technically untrue. Terry insisted on doing his own car repairs, even when he was very wealthy. And Eileen had lofty ambitions of Terry editing the Times. Pratchett began his 3-year apprenticeship in journalism in the September of 1965 on a wage of £8 and 10 shillings per week. Alongside on-the-job training, he worked in his spare time to achieve his National Council for the Training of Journalists, NCTJ qualification, which he claimed he got the top grade in the country at, and an A-level in English. While his former headmaster was undoubtedly happy to see him, other students felt that a Pratchettless school was a sadder one. The head of the debating society wrote in Technical Signet, the school magazine, to say, "Regrettably, Pratchett's premature departure has meant the loss of one of our great characters." The Books Free Press has been part of the local landscape since its founding in 1856. Is everybody muted? Yeah, everyone should be muted. I can hear crackling, but never mind. Sorry. The Books Free Press had been part of the local landscape since its founding in 1856. Every Thursday, some are not muted. Hang on. I need to mute people who aren't muted. Mute you. The power. I have the power to mute you. Mute you. There we go. Oh, there. Mute you. If you're not muted, by the way, if you could mute yourself, that'd be really good, because that should keep people quiet. Mute people on entry. Okay, there's an option for that. Oh, it's so complicated. I'm just going to ask you to mute yourselves and carry on reading. Speak more slowly. Somebody asked me to speak more slowly. Yes, I do gabble, and I will try and slow down. So, as I was saying, the book's free press had been part of the local landscape since its founding in 1856. Every Thursday, the bulky paper was forced through letterboxes across South Buckinghamshire, dispatched from its premises in High Wycombe to the local towns such as Amersham, Princess Risborough, Beaconsfield, and the dozens of villages and hamlets that orbited them, a patch Terry knew intimately. This was standard local paper stuff. 20 or so stories to a page, often barely more than 50 words apiece, covering everything from murders to the fortunes of Wycombe Wanderers FC via flower shows, village fetes, traffic accidents, and a week's worth of local weddings. Typically, half the pages were given over to classifieds and ads, the lifeblood of any local rag. Journalists were assigned a patch, and cub reporters were assigned a journalist to shadow. On arrival, the young Terry was attached to a reporter called Mr. Allen and dutifully followed him into the field, notebook in hand. Most people's first day at a new job involves being shown where the kettle is and trying to find a handy way to memorize about a dozen strangers' names. On Terry Pratchett's first day, he saw a corpse. Or at least that's the tale he would repeat countless times. One of the first stories Mr. Allen covered that day was the discovery of a body. A homeless man had fallen into an animal latrine on a farm and drowned in pig manure. This wasn't the serene and peaceful close of a life ended well. This was an obviously horrible and vividly dead body. The sight taught Terry three things. One, how undignified life could be. How undignified death could be. Two, how many colours the human body could turn. And three, the extent to which a 17-year-old could vomit on his first day at a new job. It's hard to imagine a more formative experience for a new reporter. The details of this encounter are tricky to nail down. Searching through issues of the Free Press from September 1965 yields only one story that matches Terry's description: the death of an elderly tourist from Glamorgan who was found at the Abbotswood estate in Bourne End. Frustratingly, the dates don't quite match. The body was reported in the 3rd of September edition, but found the previous week before Terry says he started his stint. What's more, the Abbotswood estate isn't a farm, nor is a tourist a tramp, as Terry often described the unfortunate man. A report in the 23rd of July edition had a family discovering a body in a river, but this was a well-heeled civil servant, and besides, the Free Press didn't start advertising for a trainee journalist until August the 13th. A woman's body found in a dike was reported on the 29th of October, but again, this doesn't fit the facts as Terry told them. In fact, there is no death reported in the book's Free Press during 1965, either as a recent discovery or a coroner's report or a classified family notice that matches the details. So was this another story that grew in the telling? The gruesome body was definitely real, and the visceral effect it had on the young writer is clear. But the first day element of is such a satisfactory narrative detail that you can't help but suspect Terry embellished it just a little. On the other hand, this story could well have been spiked, been deemed outside of the Free Press's jurisdiction, or reported in a way that was unrecognisable from Terry's original description. Whether it happened on his first day or not, that sight of the unfortunate man would stay with Terry for the rest of his life, surfacing grimly as hints in his books. Later, when the subject of death was very much on his mind, that first glimpse of a body served as an example of how horrible a man's demise could be when compared to the more peaceable alternatives. If Beaconsfield Library is where Pratchett got his real education, the book's Free Press is where he obtained his PhD. Well, that's not technically true. He got an NCTJ and an A-level. He credited several mentors at the paper with instilling in him a discipline and work ethic that would be carried into his career as an author. Experiences and lessons were soaked up by sponge-like personality to be dripped into his novels many years later. Since 1956, the Free Press had been overseen by Arthur Church, the well-liked but rather old-fashioned editor who tempted Terry away from school with the prospect of a real job. Church himself had joined as a cub reporter in 1928 at the age of 16 and would likely have seen something of himself in the young writer. It wouldn't be the last time he would extend a lifeline to a teenager desperate to prove themselves. Under Arthur Church, the Free Press trained a succession of successful and capable journalists. He stood down as editor in 1976, but continued to write a column right up until 2000, just a year before his death from lung cancer at the age of 89, an astonishing 72 years of service. Church was 53 when Pratchett began his apprenticeship and was already a man out of step with the more progressive 1960s. Dressed in tweeds and smoking a pipe, he wore a passing resemblance to J.R.R. Tolkien, a fact that couldn't have been lost on his new science fiction-obsessed staffer. Just as Tolkien distracted himself from a changing world by obsessing over his imaginary one, Church blotted out the wider modern era with a laser focus on his beloved South books, only agreeing to run pictures of the Apollo 11 landings after thinking it over carefully and deciding that the moon shines on High Wycombe too. Devoted to journalistic ethics and besotted with his hometown, Arthur Church was an ideal mentor. In 1992, a 1992 feature in the Free Press, he would say that Terry was a great lad, a little eccentric but very ambitious. George Topley forecast he would go far and gave him a real deal of encouragement. Now, Chief Reporter George Topley was, after Church, the staffer who was had the most influence on Terry. If Church's example was about being right in the sense of being correct, Topley's was about being right in the sense of being just. Terry considered Topley to be an excellent journalist and a consummate moralist who, in his youth, had attempted to stow away on a boat to Spain and fight against the fascists in the Civil War, but boarded the wrong vessel and found himself in Hull. Pratchett admitted later that he didn't know if this was literally true or just a metaphor for his journey. From Topley, he learned how to use the truth, how to be right in a way that went beyond simply being correct. It was Topley who helped stoke and sharpen the anger at injustice and unfairness that would mark much of Terry's best writing. He helped hone his moral edge. George Topley would later inspire the character of William Stickers in Terry's children's novel Johnny and the Dead, a passionate campaigner for social justice who attempted to fight the fascists in Spain and, just as Topley did, found himself on the East Yorkshire coast. In tribute, or possibly as revenge on his old mentor, a stickler for grammar who would throw incorrect copy back at hapless young writers, Terry gave William Stickers the ultimate indignity for a journalist, forcing him to spend eternity with a misspelt headstone. Other mentors included the sub-editor Johnny Howe, a short, chubby man who was an expert at hiding the dirtiest jokes and the most innocent of copy, and who nicknamed Terry Steed after the dapper oddball from the TV show The Avengers. His tall and thin colleague, Ken Bugsy Burrows, who dealt harshly with mistakes and impressed on new reporters the vital importance of deadlines and the need to turn your copy around no matter what. Burrows would later sing Terry's praises in the pages of the book's Free Press, telling the paper in 1992 that he was obviously had a talent right from the start. He had an original mind. Howe and Burrows would head to the pub together at lunch, a fine old industry tradition, looking for all the world like Buckinghamshire's answer to Laurel and Hardy. Life at the book's Free Press was never easy. Cub reporters were expected to hit the ground running, do as they were told, and crucially own their own typewriter, or else buy a clunky second-hand one from the company and pay for it in instalments from their weekly wages. Terry's trusty Imperial 58, purchased just 2 years earlier with the money from his first story, meant he was ahead of the game. The hours were long, frequently absorbing evenings and weekends, and the trainees were given the dullest and most menial jobs. Pratchett found himself zipping around the area on a succession of cheap, wobbly motorbikes, the coroner's inquiries, local council meetings and magistrates' courts, doorstepping mugging victims and writing up flower shows, parish council decisions and new Rotary Club chairmen. On Thursdays, after the paper had gone to print, he had the task of clearing and filing the spikes, the traditional sorting system of the newspaperman, literal metal spikes at the end of the desk used for discarding notes and unused copy in a way that could be easily retrieved. It was boring work on the one hand and actually very dangerous for the other, as many a careless office junior had discovered. But it's essential to a young man trying to understand how a newspaper works. He'd write short bedtime stories for younger readers, often working on them at home, polishing them up for subbing on Monday morning. There was also studying to be done, with days off and evenings allocated to NCTJ coursework, brushing up on journalistic ethics and defamation law, and trying to get close to the required 100 words per minute in Pitman's shorthand necessary for jotting down quotes and court reporting. Footnote here. Though still required as part of most journalism qualifications, the use of shorthand has declined with the popularity of firstly dictaphones and later recording apps. Oh, thank you. I've been bought a beer and told to slow down. Thanks, Mum. There's still a required part of many journalism qualifications. The use of shorthand has declined with the popularity of firstly dictaphones and later recording apps. When he first became famous enough to be interviewed himself, Pratchett would often accuse journalists using some sort of device to record the chat of cheating before asking them questions about legal and ethical practices in journalism in an attempt to catch them out. It was a job. Not a well-paid one, but more than that, it was an experience, instilling instincts and ethics that would serve him well in the future. He learned quickly that there could be no such thing as writer's block with a looming print deadline, a handy trait in an author. He was also taught to accept editing with good grace, an instinct possibly even handier. This went beyond learning a trade, though. It was an education in people. The local paper is an important part of any community, plugged into life at every level. He got to know the local police and authorities, and he saw firsthand how citizens responded to trauma or joy. Odd experiences stuck in his head, like the time a coroner's court heard about the demise of an old man who had burned to death, complete with the strange and completely unrelated detail that he'd had a rice pudding in the oven at the time. Or when a man in Beaconsfield declared himself, apropos of nothing, as the town crier, an idea people loved so much they made it official and bought him a uniform. Terry interviewed a pleasant couple who spent each evening watching a weird glowing ball journey across the sky and below the horizon, only to discover that their UFO was actually the setting sun. Each new story taught him something about the odder corners of humanity. Sometimes the person he observed most closely was himself, such as on the harrowing occasion he covered a minibus crash on New Year's Day. The horror tinged with a guilty excitement that he had a surefire front-page splash, only to find another trainee's younger sister had been killed in the incident. His reaction was to lock himself in the toilet and laugh his head off, because sometimes life is so horribly absurd that laughter is the only pressure valve available. The book's free press was an environment in which the teenage Terry Pratchett could thrive. Away from the pettiness of school, by doing work he saw as engaging and important, he found himself growing every day. A background in journalism was a major source of pride for Pratchett throughout his life. He rarely gave an interview without mentioning it, and often used his experience as a way to needle and tease reporters sent to speak to him. He would call out interviewees when he realized that they were pushing him into a neat conclusion about fans, critics, or awards, pointing out that he knew exactly what they were doing, finding the shape of the story. He knew it because he'd done it himself. To him, there was a purity in journalism. It was writing with a purpose, and it informed the way that he would later see the role of an author. You turned facts and opinions into digestible chunks of words, got as many people to read them as you could, and you ideally got paid for your trouble. His new role also came with certain responsibilities, both to people and to the truth. He would later describe the strange power he felt when given a notebook and pencil, understanding its influence on and responsibility towards an eager readership. It was a power that he was both proud of and suspected he didn't actually deserve. Terry Pratchett was a natural journalist. He completed his apprenticeship with aplomb, becoming a fully qualified member of the Free Press team in 1968. It was a pivotal year in his life. A little earlier, he'd met Lynn Purves at a party. She was an art student studying illustration at the prestigious Chelsea College of Art. And she came from a more affluent background. Her parents had built their own bungalow. Well, actually, they'd had somebody else build it for them, in the slightly posher Gerrard's Cross, while Terry was still very much the council estate boy from 40 Green. Lynn's father, R.F. Purves, was an electrical engineer and secretary of his local church. In an interview with The Times in 2011, Terry said that the golfing class gave their romance a flavour of Lady and the Tramp, although we don't know where spaghetti and meatballs figured in that courtship. His apprentice wages meant it was difficult for him to impress during their courtship. He could afford a taxi from Lynn's house to a restaurant, for example, but not from his own house to Lynn's. So he'd order a cab to their bungalow and race it there on his motorbike, which he'd hide in a field around the corner, clambering out of his leathers to reveal his best suit. When the meal was done, he would have the cab drop off his date at home, and then he'd drive him around the corner where he'd pay the driver, retrieve his bike, and go home. Lynn and her parents were none the wiser. They married on the 5th of October 1968 at Gerrard's Cross Congregational Church. Terry's best man was a fellow sci-fi fan and budding writer Dave Busby, and he gifted a silver ring to Lynn's bridesmaid, Amy Colton. The wedding photos would be the last time that Terry was ever pictured clean-shaven. He grew a beard on his honeymoon, liked the way it looked, and kept it at various lengths for the rest of his life. Naturally, the ceremony was acknowledged in that week's Bucks Free Press under the headline, Gerrard's Cross Bride for Free Press Man. The couple would remain devoted to one another for the rest of Terry's life. Many years later, attendees at a Discworld convention were told of their guest of honor, he will flirt like a champion, but don't worry, you will never find a more married man. As well as marriage and qualification, Terry would achieve another milestone in 1968. That year, the Midweek Free Press launched, a slimmer sister paper to the Bucks Free Press, published on Tuesdays and less concerned with the minutiae of South Bucks life, with more scope for features, pictures, and personalities. Terry was given his own column, though he would write it under the byline Marcus, presumably so that he could be rotated away from the role and replaced should that need arise. But it was an unnecessary precaution. Terry was the only person to write Marcus's column, and the feature was retired when he left the paper in 1970. The Midweek allowed Terry to flesh out his prose style, and ironically, it's under the guise of Marcus that the voice he would become known for, that of a wry humorist, emerges. As Marcus, he plumbed the odder corners of life in the country, delighting in spending time with stage magicians or self-styled witches. The Marcus columns gave him an opportunity to use another of his creative skills, as they were often accompanied by a cartoon signed TP. Again, you can see the combination of sharp and silly. A story about child-focused movie screenings in which adults can only attend in the company of children is illustrated by a queue of OAPs looking imploringly at a little boy in the hope that he would take them in. An image of a sneering Concorde accompanied a piece featuring an imaginary conversation regarding noise complaints at Heathrow Airport. And an article about the future local railway line is illustrated by bowler-hatted business types frantically pumping a hand-cranked rail trolley and representing the future of economy travel. This is one of my favourite facts I learned, by the way, this bit. It was while writing as Marcus for Midweek, and I found the newspaper for this when I was looking into it, that Terry sent a letter to Roald Dahl, dated the 25th of April, 1969. Expressing admiration for his work and requesting an interview for his column. Dahl, who was then 52, was at this point primarily known as a writer of inventive and rather nasty short stories for adults. Though his two recent children's novels, James and the Giant Peach and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, were both gaining fame, and his scripts, dramatising his friend Ian Fleming's books, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and You Only Live Twice, hinted that a future in screenwriting could be on the cards. When Terry arrived at Dahl's Buckinghamshire home for his interview, neither man could have known that the other one would become one of the most successful English novelists of the 20th century. Considering the juicy potential of these two great literary minds coming together, Terry's feature, published on the 21st of May, contains no great revelations, though it's not a bad read. With the benefit of hindsight, knowing what the two men would go on to achieve, the chat becomes much more interesting. Many of Dahl's quotes could easily have come from Terry himself in later interviews, arguing that art as a concept is overrated and that humans are, by and large, decent enough, except for the ones that aren't. Terry, meanwhile, was full of praise for the older man and his abilities, though it says something about Dahl's level of fame that Terry has to specify that his subject is probably best known to readers as the husband of the Oscar-winning actress Patricia Neal. Terry, who would later spend much of his spare time tending exotic plants as a hobby, makes a point of mentioning the flourishing orchids in Dahl's greenhouse. It's tempting to say that Terry took something from this meeting that would inform his future, either in his ethical approach to writing or inspiration as a children's novelist. He'd already written dozens of short stories for the paper by this point, but that may be looking for a significance that isn't really there. Real life is rarely as satisfying as the type of narrative either man could spin. Still, it's a nice footnote in Pratchett's own backstory, one that, due to being written by an unknown hack called Marcus in a spin-off from a smallish regional newspaper, few have read since it was published in 1969. In fact, at the time of writing, the official Roald Dahl website lists their correspondence, but concludes, tantalizingly, we don't know if the meeting ever took place. So, screw you, the Roald Dahl website, I found it. So, we're winding up now, but this last story I really like. In his 5 years at the Books Free Press, Terry said he went from boy to man. He learned a trade, he got married and grown up. It was time to take a new step. In September of 1970, Terry and Lynn moved to a cottage in Roborough in Somerset in the southwest of England. It was an area they would fall in love with and one that would inspire much of his later writing, especially the rural landscapes of the Witch books and the Tiffany A. King young adult series. Terry had been offered a role at the Western Daily Press, the Bristol-based newspaper, serving a number of counties in the southwest, including Gloucestershire, Wiltshire and Somerset, selling around 76,000 copies a day, 6 days a week, a substantially bigger patch than South Books. This was a different type of journalism. A daily newspaper is a beast that needs constant feeding. It's more serious in tone, less personal, and more frequently involved in issues of national and international importance. Terry started at the Western Daily Press on the 28th of September and filed his first story the next day, a report on the assassination of Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. It was a far cry from flower shows and parish council meetings. Despite the hard news focus, the Western Daily still had scope for Terry's more personal features, this time printed under the more recognisable byline of Terence Pratchett. The evolution of his comic tone of voice continued, though through these more character-led pieces. In a story entitled The King and I, or How the Bottom Dropped Out of the Wise Man Business, published on Christmas Eve, Pratchett attempts to buy gold, frankincense and myrrh during a shopping spree in Bristol. It proved an unsuccessful quest, but a very successful piece of comic writing, and the accompanying photo shows the author dressed as King Herod. He filed several first-person pieces in his time at the Western Daily, which showcased his warmth and wit as a brilliant observer of the minutiae of ordinary life. Sadly, though, there's more to the cut and thrust of a daily newspaper than whimsical attempts to recreate the Nativity, and as a straight reporter, Terry never quite lived up to editor Eric Price's standards. Terry's new boss could not have contrasted more with the genial, polite Arthur Church. Eric Price had come from Fleet Street, having spent time at the Evening Standard and the Daily and Sunday Express, as well as major regionals like the Manchester Evening News. His vision was to apply the techniques of Fleet Street to regional reporting, making sub-editing into a fine art. Sub-editing, by the way, subs are the unsung heroes and detested villains of the print industry. Their job is to take stories written by reporters, columnists, and writers and proofread them, edit where necessary, and add headlines and subheadings, making sure that they all fit. The good ones polish and improve, the bad ones butcher and usually take the jokes out. If you're reading this, then we got a good one. Footnote, this is a dirty trick to play on a sub-editor. And I would like to thank my sub-editor for letting me keep that joke in. I genuinely didn't think she would. So, the new editor turned sub-editing into fine art, hacking and slashing as he punched up copy, inserted provocative headlines. It's an approach he executed with great effect. At its peak, with Price at the helm, the Western Daily was selling 80,000 copies a day. This ruthless, no-nonsense approach was applied to his staffing. One colleague, Ian Beales, writing to the Press Gazette on Price's death in 2013, recalled many a luckless reporter or sub being sent packing before their first shift was even complete. Staff members were terrified of Price, who would hurl expletive-ridden commands across the newsroom, shout down anyone that crossed him and sack people on the spot. He had a habit of gabbling instructions quickly and expecting them to be obeyed to the letter. Anyone unwise enough to ask him to repeat something would be met with an angry, "Why don't you just fucking listen?" Another journalist working at the Western Daily at the time was Tony Bush, then a cub reporter of 21. He remembers Price's management style as terrifying but effective. He told me this, it was a tyrannical regime. He would shout at you, swear at you, and slam his hand down on the desk. He was inspired, and he did inspire everyone else, but people were also afraid of him. He was a hell of a taskmaster and set a ferocious pace. Even today, I still have a hard spot on the second finger of my right hand where I just kept writing. It was constant. A few weeks of yelling and bullying was just too much for Terry, who vowed to give Price a piece of his mind. The more reserved Bush, who had arrived at the paper slightly before Terry, remembers cautioning him, "Do be careful, dear chap." After several days of getting his nerve up, Terry finally got a chance to stand his ground when Price came storming through the saloon-style doors of the newsroom, marching like a guard officer, remembers Bush. Knowing it was now or never, Terry got to his feet, turned to face his boss, and jacked up on nerves and adrenaline, promptly fainted. Price took one look at the prone, bearded figure on the floor and demanded, "Someone get this body out of here." Nevertheless, young reporters benefited professionally from working for Price. "I never wrote a decent headline before I went to the Western Daily," remembers Bush. "Afterwards, I never wrote a bad one. But working under such pressure began to take its toll. It was like Colditz," said Bush, who, like Terry, daydreamed of escaping to somewhere more sedate and civilized, eyeing jealously the nearby Bath Evening Chronicle. Bush jumped ship to the rival paper within 6 months, receiving an offer of a job on the subs desk. Terry, meanwhile, was eventually fired by Price in April 1971. As he said himself in his Trinity College lecture, he just didn't have the killer instinct for that sort of journalism. Price, however, would later say that Terry Pratchett was one of the best writers he'd ever worked with. His sacking from the Western Daily marked the end of Terry's time as a reporter. Ultimately, it was not a life he wanted to continue. He'd become jaded, sick of asking widows and mothers how they felt about their loved one's death, bored of chasing stories. His time working under Eric Price had underlined for him where his strengths were. In 1971, he returned to the Books Free Press, this time as a sub-editor, away from the coalface of reporting, where his gifts for sparkling copy and fastidious accuracy would be put to good use, and where he could devote more time and energy to the writing that he was doing in his spare time. And that's the end of chapter 3. Thank you very much. I'm going to unmute everybody. Unmute all. Hooray. Thanks very much for listening to that, guys. I'm aware that was... now just look through the chat and see if there are any questions before we hand over to Rachel and Jason.
There is a couple of questions there, Mark. One of them was how did you find the Roald Dahl story from Teresa?
That was... the Roald Dahl story, that was a good day. I found the Roald Dahl story. Essentially, part of my research was it's getting very loud there. Part of my research essentially was to read as much of that stuff as I could. So the British Library has every single copy of the Books Free Press, all of them. And it was a weekly newspaper, and the Midweek Free Press. So essentially, and Colin Smythe's website, which is an absolutely invaluable tool, lists every article that Terry wrote. So all I did was cross-reference them, call the British Library, order the relevant copies, and then go through each one of them looking for the good stuff. It was just journalism, really. It was just research. It was a matter of getting. I must have read 150 copies of that newspaper. But it was just a matter of going through them and trying to find the stories. Colin didn't even know that Roald Dahl piece was there. He just knew the headline. When I saw that, I was just like, there's a picture of Roald Dahl. I was like, oh, this is amazing. And the fact that because it was written under a pseudonym, no one knew it was there. It'd never been recorded. It'd never been kept. But you had this thing where young Terry Pratchett interviews middle-aged Roald Dahl in 1969, and no one had read it for years. And so that was a really good find. That was one of my favorite days of my research.
Cool. Sure, she's scanning. That was the main one that people wanted to know. I'm just going to put it out there to everybody. If you could mute yourself, and if you need to talk, can you press to talk? We get a lot of feedback coming through.
Didn't bring you.
It's much easier to ask you to mute yourselves rather than do it ourselves. Some of the questions I got sent, Mark, were simple things like, how on earth did you get to write this biography of Terry Pratchett?
How did I get to write this biography of Terry Pratchett? Hang on, there's one person who keeps shouting and just looking to the side and calling, and I don't know what he's doing, but over there is something really brilliant, and I like the idea that we could turn the camera around and just like see a fight kicking off in the corner, but possibly mute it so we don't hear it. So how did I get to write this book? I mean, the short answer is anyone can write a book. Anyone can write a biography. You don't need special permission to write a biography of anybody. I was asked to pitch a book by the publishers. I actually originally pitched. They wanted somebody to write a book about Tolkien. And I thought, oh, I can pitch a book about Tolkien. I might be able to write. I like J.R.R. Tolkien, thinking there's nothing new to say about J.R.R. Tolkien. Nothing. Like, everyone has said everything there is to say. And you need like a PhD in Middle Earth studies to write about Tolkien. But I was like, I'll pitch it. I'll see what happens. They came back with, well, yeah, we found this Tolkien expert to write our Tolkien book. And I thought, well, that's fair enough. But she said, we really like your writing. Is there anyone else you'd like to write about? And my immediate thought, the bell in my head just went, I want to write about Terry Pratchett, please. Because I realized no one had written this book. And suddenly I realized that I just couldn't believe I had the opportunity to do it. Now I could write a book about my favorite author. So I pitched it and I got to do it. And it's not anything magic or like prestigious like in me that I got to write it. It's just that I'm the person. It's just that there was a publisher who wanted to know if I wanted to write a book, and I wanted to write a book about Terry. So that's how it happened. Just glad I got there first.
Well, yes, because as we all know, Rob Wilkins is meant to be writing an official one at some point in the future.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to reading Rob's, and I think it'd be really interesting to sort of, for mine to almost be like the footnotes to his, because he's got obviously an angle that I will never be able to have. He knew the real person. All I can do is read as much as I could and talk to people who knew him. Rob's angle, but I quite like the idea that you'll have this very, very intimate, personal, like official version, and then beside it you can have the one I've written, which is more of a journalistic, more kind of I talks in more of a kind of critical way about the work and is very thorough and that kind of thing. And so I like the idea that they can sit side by side.
Yeah, and of course you have an advantage over Rob, because Rob's only known Terry for 20 odd years, so of course you've done all the research of the pre-Discworld stuff.
Rob, if you're watching, you're welcome.
Well, yeah. So I'm going to ask the question. I know the answer, but many here won't. When did you read your first ever Terry Pratchett book?
1992. The answer is 1992. My mum and dad got given paperbacks of The Colour of Magic and Guards by a bloke down the pub, which is brilliantly appropriate. And they read them, loved them, and passed them on to me because, like, I was a precocious 12-year-old who liked reading fantasy novels and Monty Python and the Young Ones. So it kind of, and was obsessed with comedy and that sort of thing. So it was, they went, oh, Mark will like these. And the good thing about both of those two books is they both have swear words in the first 5 or 6 pages. And if you're 12 years old, that is already brilliant. And so I was hooked in by the swearing, first of all, and then the jokes. And the fact that those two books, especially Guards, is a really solid fantasy story. So it works on that level too. So I read those two first and then hit the library in my hometown of Elshilton and read the P shelf in the fantasy section, like front to back.
Yeah, I did similar. My mum dished out weird equal rights to me, actually, about a year before you started reading them. And I went down the library and just pulled every single one they had out and read the lot.
And when I learned that you could order books from other libraries, that was game changing. I didn't actually own any of my own Pratchett books for years because I just used the library. But I think the next one I read was Witches Abroad. It was the hardback of Witches Abroad. I got that out next. I can't remember where I went after that, but I was insatiable. And I, like me, I suppose you reread them and continually up until the present day. Yeah. So some of those early ones I must have read 20 times. Some of the ones that I started reading 25 years ago, I must have read I must have read Witches Abroad a dozen times. There was a period where that's all I read until I thought maybe I should branch out a little bit and bought a Douglas Adams book.
Douglas Adams. Question.
I'm going to ask because there's so many of you, and we've only got literally 25 of you on our screen. So if you have a question, if you can shout in the comments that you've got a question, then we can call you up and you can then talk. It makes things a little bit easier for us.
Let's see what Helen's asking for.
But we do know that Helen Cordinley is asking. So where are you, Helen? If you want to ask, what's your question?
I was just going to say, what's Mark's favourite character in Discworld?
You'd think I'd have a stock answer for this by now, wouldn't you?
No.
Because
it's
partly,
a hard question.
I mean, partly it depends on the week, doesn't it? And also, I don't think it's fair to restrict it to Discworld because I think people tend to forget that Terry didn't just write Discworld. He wrote, and actually one of my favorite characters is Johnny Maxwell, who basically was my childhood. I totally related to the character of Johnny Maxwell. I loved those books because I just saw myself in them so much. Death is obviously just what a concept of a character. And there isn't anyone on earth who doesn't love Nanny Ogg, particularly if you grew up where I grew in the countryside like I did and you met her all the time. So they're probably my favorite ones. I
agree with you on Death. Death's my favorite. It's very strange when people say, "Oh, so who's your favorite character?" And you go, "Death."
I really like Gerda in the Bromeliad books as well. The Bromeliad books, I think that's just a really good character, just really, really funny and awkward. And I've got a soft spot for Rincewind because I think I saw myself in Rincewind as well.
Yeah, but I'm married.
I see myself as I'm a magrat by nature.
It's good of you to admit it. The first step is knowing.
I know.
Jessie Bell Purton's got a question. Where are you, darling?
I'm here. I'm waving.
Hi, Jessie.
All right, Mark, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Good question.
I know, I like to be polite. I was just going to say, do you think you're going to do a book tour? I know it's not really a good time at the moment, but lockdown and everything.
I might do a succession of Zoom calls from different locations. It won't really matter who else is there. I'll just go to different places and do Zoom calls from. I'd love to. I'm not sure if there's interest there. If there's, it's something I kind of had in mind that I'd feel out and see if people were interested in it or not. Maybe go to local bookshops and stuff.
Do readings and signings.
Yeah, just an excuse to travel around the country and talk to people about Discworld and do it and show off because I could do a little bit of talking and then. But I don't know if next year when things open up again, hopefully when the paperback comes out, it might be something that I can look into. But I honestly don't know if people would be interested. Like Terry doing a book tour is one thing, but some bloke who's written a book about Terry doing a book tour is slightly another. But there are people who like my band and stuff, so I'm thinking about it. I can't give you a definite answer, but I'd really love to.
I think Bill said he's going to start doing the club again in September, so.
That will be the comedian Will Hodgson from Chippenham, if anyone's interested, who is an excellent comedian and well worth your time checking out.
Andrew Neville's got a question for you. Where are you, Andrew?
Hello.
If you want to...
I'm here.
Go on, go ask Mark.
Right, my question is, what is your favourite non-Discworld Pratchett book?
That is a really good question because, like I said, people don't appreciate the non-Discworld ones enough. I think Nation. I think Nation is an incredible achievement.
Yeah,
Nation
me too. I cannot get through chapter 2 without tearing up.
It's so powerful. It's such an incredible piece of writing, and the great thing about Nation, I think, is I don't think Terry could have written that book any earlier than he did. Like the Terry Pratchett that wrote The Colour of Magic or those early Discworld novels could not go near a book like Nation. It's so rich, so layered, so complicated, and still continues to be really funny. So I think Nation is the best of the non. I think Nation might be the best Terry Pratchett book. Full stop. I really like. Only You Can Save Mankind. I've got a soft spot for that. As I said, I read just because it's one of those I read like over and over again, and I think the Truckers trilogy is
if I recall, I might be getting it wrong, but I'm sure of Nathan. Terry said something. He thinks it's the best book he's ever wrote or would ever write.
Nation. He did say that about Nation.
He did say that. Yeah.
Before that, he talked about he actually thought Johnny and the Bomb was the best book he'd written. No, Johnny and the Dead, sorry, was the best book he'd written. So he considered Johnny and the Dead to be the book his masterpiece in the as we all know as Terry Pratchett fans traditional sense of the word, as the piece that ended his apprenticeship and showed he was a master. And Johnny and the Dead is a really, really good book as well. But yeah, I think I think as fans, people don't talk enough about the non-Discworld books because I think that's where most of the interesting ideas are.
Fans in general don't talk about the books. To be honest, Mark, if you ever went to a Discworld event, you just don't ever talk about the books.
It's almost taboo.
Yeah, it's almost. Believe me, sat at the Irish Con at the gala dinner, and there was this very, very young Terry Pratchett fan. He must have been about 11, and he was desperate to get out of us what our favourite Discworld book was. And we were talking about some random TV series at the time.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's really difficult. We've got beer and it just doesn't happen.
It's the one thing we've got in common. That the fact we're all Pratchett fans is the glue that glues us all together. But the fact is we don't very rarely actually talk about
it. Doesn't need to. I guess it's all been said already, hasn't it? Like, if that's how you know each other.
It reminds me of the old days on Usenet on AFP where relevancy was very rare. We very rarely talked about the actual books on the news group.
Relevancy is overrated.
Yeah.
Karen wants to know, who would you dress up as?
I've given this a lot of thought actually, because I've never done cosplaying at conventions. I'm a bit scared of conventions. I've never really, because I'm fundamentally antisocial, and I like doing them with my band because I've got an excuse to run away and not speak to anybody. But I was trying to think if I was doing it. I think Buddy from Soul Music is probably the easiest one that I could do and the one that'd be most fun. But I quite like the idea of going like completely left field and doing Joshua Valiente from the and seeing if anyone even worked it out, because it'd be quite a cool costume, like a kind of outdoorsy kind of, and then I could make a stepping box with a potato in it. And you know, those books have. Let's say that they dip a bit in the middle, but I'm quite fond of them, and I just think that'd be quite a cool costume. But if I was being obvious, I think Buddy from Soul Music would be a really good costume. I could do my hair, which is like it used to be before lockdown made me grow it out, and tell everybody I'm an Elvish impersonator.
Yeah.
You think?
Rohan,
so do you think Valiente would end up as being a modern two-flower?
No, Joshua Valiente is substantially cooler than Two Flower.
Oh, fight talk.
Two Flower is a charming, lovely character, but Valiente is a gruff, like gunslinging, like hardened explorer, rather than this kind of cute little guy who's really interesting and fascinating and everything.
Hasn't got the naivety, has he?
No, very much not. Is the complete opposite. But that's an interesting pairing. I like how totally different those books are to other stuff. It's something that's quite interesting about them, is that you actually can't imagine them existing in the same world, and that says a lot about Terry's versatility. You
do have to wonder, having read the High Megas, so you got the original concept of the Long Earth series, which Terry wrote a long time ago. You do have to wonder how much of the Long Earth series was actually written by Terry. I know Terry was involved with his name's escaped me right now.
Stephen
Baxter.
I do apologize.
We can only speculate. Although the High Megas is an exceptional bit of writing. That short story that's in it's in a blink of the screen if no one's read it, which is the original concept for The Long Earth. The sort of the short stories he was writing in 1986 or 85, I think it was. As to how much Terry wrote of those books, we can only speculate. I mean, there are bits in there that jump out as pure Terry. There's a lot in book 4, the flashback stuff to kind of Victorian London, and the kind of league of stepping gentlemen that's formed. That feels really, really Terry. But then again, the stuff about the World War I soldier in the first book, that to me feels very Terry, but apparently that was written by Stephen Baxter, so who knows? We'll never know. Well, Rob knows. Probably Rob knows. And Stephen Baxter. Probably Stephen Baxter knows. And the editor. But they're not saying.
I suspect if it's anything like Good Omens, that they both, Terry and Neil, threw so much at each other and edited and put it together that neither of them can actually remember who wrote any one particular part of the book.
The official line on the Long Earth series is that they both rewrote each other. And like they'd write a bit, they'd hand it over, it would be edited, rewrote, and handed back, and the whole book worked like that. But that's the official line. I imagine I imagine there was some of that. I suspect the later ones, Terry probably did work more on the stories and wrote less, but we don't know.
We've got some more questions. I'm gonna ask Mike Portsmouth. Can you mute, please? Because we're just hearing you come through, unfortunately.
Thanks.
Thank you. We've got some questions here from Rohan. He's saying, looking forward to reading the book. What was a point in your research which you define as the writer's block that you now look back at and go, phew, I'm glad I got past that?
I mean, luckily I never really had that, partly because it's the good thing about writing a biography is that you know the story. So I'm never going to have to think, oh, well, what happens next? I'm stuck, because I always know what happens next. I always know that I had like in front of me, I made a detailed timeline of Terry's life, so I could always refer to it. So I never got writer's block because I always knew what the next bit was going to be. If anything, it was the opposite. I ended up writing far more than I thought I ever would. The hardest bit to write, though, the bit that I wasn't sure about and the bit that was the biggest slog was the thing with Terry's life is that it's a 3-act structure, and the way I approached the book was a 3-act structure. And the first act is young kid is a precocious writer, becomes a journalist. We don't know all this stuff about him, so it's interesting. He publishes some books, he becomes a full-time writer, and they become successful. That's Act 1, and that's an interesting story. And then Act 3 is heartbreaking but fascinating. Terry becomes ill, he becomes a campaigner, and he's knighted, he becomes a national treasure whilst also battling his illness, and that is a really fascinating, really, really good story. But the middle act, that was the hard bit, because the middle act is basically bloke sits at home and writes books, because he went on signing tours and the occasional holiday, and once he made a documentary about orangutans. But essentially, if you look at the level of his output, you look at how many books Terry wrote in the late 80s and early 90s. There were 5 Terry Pratchett books published in 1990 alone. 5 in 1 year. And so he just stayed at home and worked. So there's not much narrative there. So that was hard. But what happened there is it became about the work. It became about his development as a writer. So rather than what he did next, what his next job was, how he lived his life, it became how did his writing develop? How did his persona develop? How did his sort of celebrity status develop? And that bit was harder. I think the chapter on Discworld I called Discworld Mania, about Discworld becoming really, really big, which is where I talk about the Clarecraft models and the conventions and the fandom building up and all that kind of stuff, because it was so detailed and there was so much to get in. That was the hardest bit to write. But I think I pulled it off. I worked on it that bit more than anything, just to try and make it not just a list of products, and a list of books and a list of products. So yeah, that was the hard bit.
I suspect that's the bit where when I wrote my review, that's where my criticisms possibly came in, was probably because you found that bit the hardest, is also the bit I found was...
Which is ironic, because it's the bit that you're in.
Yes, I know. But Yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know. That was a bit, I think, where opinion became fact, and there was a crossover between opinion and facts and that sort of stuff. And
I think that's because part of my background is as a critic. I write music and film reviews and things like that, and I kind of feel like you have to have an authorial voice when you're writing about this stuff. You actually have to. I have to have a kind of commitment behind my opinions to carry the narrative through. But otherwise, it just felt. I think it just would have been too dry. That's when for me, it would have just been a list of books or a list of merchandise or a list of TV adaptations and stuff. And so, yeah, I wanted to become more. So that's kind of intentionally opinionated, but I think I can see how some people might kind of be rubbed up the wrong way by it.
It's a small criticism for a great book. So.
Thank you. It's okay. I'm not immune to criticism.
Rich wanted to know: was there any bits of Terry's backstory that you really had to deep dive to find the evidence to back up what you were saying?
I mean, anything that happened before about 1985 was hard to research because all you have is Terry's stories. And as I've found through my research, is Terry wasn't always the most reliable narrator of his own life, because he occasionally would switch a few facts around to make the story better, which I love. I think I loved that about him. And the more of those I found, the more fond of them I became. I think that's a brilliant thing for a writer to do, and it's part of creating your persona. But it meant that I had to, particularly those bits in the 70s where all you really know about Terry Pratchett in the 70s is he worked for a newspaper, he lived in Somerset, and he wrote 2 books. That's really the only facts we have. So that's where the real research came in. Finding those newspapers and reading them, finding people who worked with him at the time and interviewing them, looking at the kind of the landscape where he lived and and finding every single bit of evidence, everything that Terry said, finding because a lot of the research was just reading endless interviews. And because Terry was a brilliant interviewee, he prepared for his interviews in advance. So when he was promoting one book, the interviews if you read all the books around, say, Masquerade, all the interviews around Masquerade, around the campaign around Masquerade, it's essentially the same interview over and over again, because he knows he's going to be asked the same questions. So he's got these prepared answers in advance, and they're zingers. He writes really good one-liners. But it meant you needed a really good journalist to punch through that to get more. So you'd read 4 interviews, and they'd all be pretty much the same. And then in the 4th one, you'd get one fact that I didn't know before, where somebody asked him something, and it would trigger a memory, or he'd say something about something that I didn't know, and you'd go like, oh, so in the 60s you did this, and I go back, and then so piecing those things together was a job of work. That was the kind of elbow grease. That was the coalface of it. So yeah, and you just find out what you can, and then I'd go and research those things, and I'd try and find somebody to ask, and who worked at this newspaper at this time? Are they still alive? Are they still writing? Can I get hold of them? Who do they know? Who can they put me in touch with? And so I relied a lot more, and that's the 70s and early 80s. I relied a lot more, because Terry wrote actually a lot more about the 60s than he did the 70s when he in interviews and speeches and stuff. So that era was the hardest one to research, but actually that's where I found the coolest stuff, because it was the stuff that no one really knows. So yeah, that I think was, I've forgotten the question.
It was about deep diving for backing up your evidence.
That's where the deep dive was.
Yeah,
definitely.
We've got some people asking, will there be any translations of your book?
I don't know. I hope so. That's up to the publishers, unfortunately. That's out of my hands. Internationally, I know it's coming out in Canada, Australia, and America. Those are the only places I know about. And then it's down to my publishers to do deals with other territories and other countries. If you happen to work for a Italian or German or French or Spanish publisher who wants to license this book and translate it, get in touch. I will hook you up, because frankly, I would love it. The more countries the more people who can read it, the more countries it comes out, the better. And the more money I get, because there is not much money in this lark.
No, not at all. What's the most Terry thing you actually did while writing the book?
The most Terry thing I did was diligent journalism, because that kind of work ethic was what's most important to him. He had this incredible work ethic. Came from a working class background. He came from a background where you got on with it, you got the job done. And every time I found myself flagging, I'd remember that Terry knocked out like 15 books in 6 years in the late 80s and early 90s, and it's like, I can write one. And I knew that he would write a certain amount of words a day, so I would try and at least do that. I felt like
he was a bit of a sod for phoning people up though and asking them to do the research.
Yeah, which wasn't a luxury that was available to me. But so that was the bit where I felt I was doing him the most justice. And also I had to, because if I didn't put the work in, if I'd sort of phoned this in, then it would have just disappointed people. If the first person to attempt to write the story properly had done a rubbish job of it, it would make the estate much more suspicious for people doing it in the future, and much less likely to kind of go, yeah, all right, go on then. And like, grudgingly, we don't approve, but we won't be stopping you. If I'd done a bad job, they might have stopped me, and they might in the future not let people go in hard on stopping people doing it. And it would have. I didn't want to ruin it for anybody, and I didn't want to waste a year on something that wasn't like a passion project, like a real work of love. So that was, putting the effort in is the most Terry thing I did.
Yeah, going on the fact that we've read quite a lot of books that analyses Terry's work, etc. in our time, I don't think the Pratchett estate would stop anything, because they've not stopped some of the rubbish that's been published. So,
well, true.
We haven't reviewed it as a result. We've read it and gone, we're not going to write a review, because writing this is crap is not a good thing to do.
So if you've sent your book to Discworld Monthly and they never reviewed it, you now know why.
I did that with one particular book, and it was a number of short stories based on ideas or inspired by Terry. And I got this book through, and I read the first chapter and the first story, and I wrote back to him and said, look, I'm going to decline to review this because, well, quite frankly, it's awful. And I'd like to, if I'm going to do a review, I'd like to find something positive to say. I don't like to just come in and say, this is rubbish, I don't want to do it. So I'd rather not do it. And the editor went back and goes, yeah, it's not the best book. Some of the best stories, some of the better ones are later on in the book. And I thought, what kind of book doesn't lead with at least the best story or a decent story? I don't know.
Don't start your album with the worst song.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I've had a couple of private messages saying, can we drag you to Llamados holiday camp in 2 years' time?
I would love to come to that to Llamados. I can never. I always in my head it's always been Llamados, but because I can't do the thing.
Because of course we ran it last time and everybody absolutely loved it. And of course with the con not happening this year, which of course would have happened next weekend.
Yeah.
The con would have happened next weekend.
And you would have come down and brought us a pint. So
I would have. Yeah, I would have done. Sorry, I'll have to do it via PayPal or Deliveroo now.
Now we'll save it for next time we're in London, and we'll have
the con being cancelled is such a obviously it's heartbreaking for everybody involved, and it's it's really sad, and also it's the least important thing that's happening in the world at the moment, to be annoyed that a convention got cancelled because the rest of the world is on fire. But I was originally given like an extra 6 months to write this book. It was meant to come out in January next year. I was given until January this year to finish it. And I said, actually, I'd really like to get it out by the Discworld convention. And they went, oh, you think you can do it? And I was like, yeah. And you're like, okay, as long as you can get it in get the first draft in by the 1st of October, we can publish it in time for that. So I basically put my marriage at risk and battered my mental health into the floor by finishing this book, particularly at the end. By trying to get this book finished in time to get it out for this summer. And then I don't have to have it out for this summer, and I could have had the extra 6 months. So that was a shame.
Yeah, quite a few of us were disappointed. Obviously, we'd written talks, we'd organised, events, etc. for it as well. Yeah, it's really weird not packing up stuff in boxes to take with us. because we're going nowhere.
And my band was supposed to be playing as well. We were really my band was playing the Sunday night, and I was really looking forward to that. I don't think that never even got announced. So there's a thing that people probably don't know is it? Yeah, the men that will not be blamed for nothing were meant to be playing on the Sunday night, and I was really looking forward to that. Nope.
Yeah, that's life. That's life at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm laughing because Andrew Neville's just written, "We don't have guests of honour at Llamados." No, that's true. We don't have guests.
No one mentioned guest of honour.
No, sorry, we don't have any. Even if Rob Wilkins turned up, I'd make him buy a ticket.
Well, let's face it, Rob Wilkins can afford a ticket.
Exactly.
And we'd also give him a broom and get him to sweep up, but that's a different thing.
Yes. I believe you want to talk to your cover artist, Andrea.
Yes. I did. Which is I thought we'd get this in while we were here. So if people aren't aware,
I've got one here, Mark.
Oh, you have? Yes. So Andrea C. White did the amazing cover artwork as I would say as modelled by Rachel, but she's not talking, so she's not on the screen.
Oh, I'm talking. It's here. It's here. Look.
If it's talking, you can see it. Yeah.
Which was absolutely stunning. Andrea, are you here?
Yes.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Hooray! Do you prefer I should have asked you this in advance. Do you prefer Andrea or Andy?
Andrea is okay.
Andrew's okay. Cool. Live all the way from Eastern Europe by the magic of the internet. Thank you so much for coming on the call. I really appreciate it. And I've not had a chance to say to your face, thank you so much for letting me use the picture. Because it's beautiful. It's the most stunning picture. And if you're not aware, Andrew did a load of artwork based around the Good Omens TV show that this comes from. And her book, which I sold a few copies in special editions on our own side, is stunning. It's completely beautiful. And I didn't keep one. I sold all of them, and I have to buy my own now. But her work is magnificent. So I just wanted to sort of introduce her. So can you tell us first of all, I mean, I'm assuming, was Good Omens your entry into the world of Terry Pratchett?
Yes. I did read a few books when I was younger, but I didn't read much of Terry Pratchett because there wasn't much of his books in the library here. There was mostly, I don't know, Stephen King and things.
What was it about Good Omens that really sparked for you? Because I've seen so much of your Good Omens art, and it's so good. But it's obviously really, really inspired you. What was it that jumped out about that show?
Well, no, it just, it has a certain spirit. It's funny and it's warm, and it just the story was. I don't know, it's really inspiring, and the characters, of course, are amazing, and the actors were brilliant. So I couldn't stop painting. Just there's so many, I don't count them anymore.
Could you tell me a little bit about your process, about how you assemble a piece? Because it's digital, isn't it? Everything you draw. Is
yes,
digital.
It's digital. I paint in Photoshop with a drawing tablet. And usually I start with the reference picture, of course. I take a screenshot if it's something from a TV show or if it's a photo. I do a little sketch, and then I sort of just start filling in the colors and just, most of the Good Omens paintings took around, 5 to 10 hours, because I call them sketchy paintings because they don't take much time. But the Terry Pratchett portrait that I think that took around 30 hours.
Wow.
Because it's also, when you're painting someone that's not, it's not here anymore. It just sort of, it makes you a bit emotional. So I painted on and off, and it took a while to finish. But I'm happy you like it.
I love it, and I think you can see that it made you emotional. I think you captured that because it's quite an emotional image. and there's a real beauty to that image, and for me it really caught the spirit of who Terry was, because there's a melancholy in there and there's also a mischievousness in there, and a lot of that, and partly that's there in the photo you use, but it's also but I think something in the transformation from the photo to the art, you imbibed it with a kind of magicalness, with a kind of magic, with a kind of romance that said everything that I wanted this book to say. And so when I saw it because Rihanna Pratchett retweeted the picture, and I just immediately was like, that's the cover to my book. Without knowing that that's what I'd had in my head, it summed up everything that I wanted the book to say. And I have to say, I think I owe quite a lot of any success this book has to you, because I think it's such an eye-catching image that it'll make people click. It'll make people click the link. Won't make people like the book, but it will make people but it might make people pick it up. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
What are you working on now? What are you working on next?
Well, right now I'm working on a few charity commissions for a fundraiser. And I have a few Good Omens pieces planned, and I never plan much ahead. I usually just, whatever strikes me that moment, I just pick up the brush, my digital brush, and paint it. So that's pretty much it.
I love the fact you're still painting Good Omens. We were watching it. Me and Nicoletta, my wife, were watching. We were rewatching it the other day, and just sat there going, "This is so brilliant." So I got asked. I did a radio interview today for BBC Somerset, and they were talking to me about how Terry. I wanted them to ask me about how much Terry loves Somerset, so I could say, well, he did move to Wiltshire in 1994, so that much. But they never asked. But they were talking about TV adaptations and movie adaptations, and whether they could truly capture the spirit of the book. And I said, I think Good Omens is a good shout for something that really does capture the spirit of the book. I think it's the best version of that story you could do. So I can see why it captured you. But if people want to commission you for anything, could you put your contact details in the chat, or put your email, your website in the chat so people can get hold of you?
I'm on the phone right now, and I'm on the phone so I can't really, but
okay, I'll do it then. I will
okay,
I will put it, or I'll put it in the Facebook group, the Facebook page for the event. And do you take commissions, right?
Yes, I do take commissions. I do.
Yeah, have a look at Andrew's work, because it's wonderful, and I think we owe her so much. Yeah, thank you very much for talking. I really appreciate you. It's really nice to see your face. It's really nice to put a face to the name.
Yeah, it always is, isn't it? Because that's the problem with so many of the artists, is of course we never get to see them, we never get to meet them. I did the same with Laura Allen Anderson, who did some of the covers for the newer Tiffany Aiken books. I got in contact with her online, and it was just fab to actually be able to put a face to the hand that paints the beauty. I love those pictures. Those the kind of punkier, more kind of like kick-ass version of Tiffany. Yes. I really like that. Yeah. Yeah, they're quite good. So, is everybody ready for a quiz? No! We're going to challenge Mark. Okay, I'd like to say, before we do a quiz, right, if this was a quiz about Terry Pratchett's life, I would be very confident. If you were going to ask me what school he went to, what his parents' name was, what kind of car his dad drove, or what the name of the cottage he lived in the 1970s was, I'd be very confident. I am not that good on which minor characters appeared in which Discworld novels. I will do my best, but no promises. Okay, guys, can we ask everyone not to type the answers into the comments box? No spoilers. No spoilers allowed. Right, hang on, I need something to lean on. Oh, paper, pen. Paper, yep. Paper, pen. Paper and pens. Okay. Because we are very, very old school. Okay, this is a 2-round competition. There's two rounds. Sorry, quiz, not competition, quiz. This is a 2-round quiz. Okay, no problem. Not to worry. There's 18 questions in the first one, and in the first round, and 8 questions in the second round. And you won't find the answers in the Unseen University Challenge, because we write our own. We haven't been doing this for 23 years by cheating and using other people's work. I've owned this since 1996. I thought it might finally come in useful. Okay. No.
Okay, so we thought we'd start off with a general Discworld to ease you all in. So, okay, round 1, question 1. In sorcery, who escapes the snake pit with Rincewind?
Yes, I know. I love it. It's all gone quiet, and all the faces are going, ah! It's brilliant. Love it. Question 2. An advert for soup was added to the German edition of Sorcery. Name the brand of soup.
Joking.
We've talked about it at conventions and everything.
Oh, God.
Colin Smythe's talked about it quite a bit at conventions. It was one of the things that really bugged him.
Okay. Question 3. According to Terry, what 2 things are faster than light?
And there's a point for each. Question 4. What is the name of the pub in Cable Street? And we will accept either name. Mark looks so serious.
Oh yeah, he knows he's up against it, doesn't he?
Oh, bless.
My quizzing face.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Poker face. Look it up in the atlas.
No cheating, Teresa. We can see the book.
Question 5. Rincewind and Twoflower communicate in what language?
I love the fact that Andrew Neville knows this one. I can see by his face. He's smiling. What question are we on?
That's 5.
Oh, okay. Question 6. What are the names of the rat catchers of Bad Blintz? There is 2 of them, and there's 1 point for each. Stop laughing. We have to do this again in a month.
Okay, yes, we do. Different questions, though, hopefully. Question 7. How did Nanny help her daughter-in-law iron her petticoats?
I'm sure it's in the same way I help my son clean the counters. 7A. What did Twoflower call his dragon? Stop laughing. It's not
Sorry,
funny.
I'm just looking at all these faces.
I know all these faces are just going.
No, I got that one.
Moving to gallery mode just for the lols.
Yeah. Question 9. In Discworld cartography, what did the acronym MMBU stand for?
Question 10. What is Miss Macalariat's first name? I've been practicing saying that all day.
Question 11. What are the names of the 4 boars that pull the Hogfather's sleigh?
There's a point for each one you name. And I got it wrong earlier today, just for the laugh.
Yeah, you managed to combine 2.
Oh, didn't I just? Awful. Yeah. Question 12. How was the sound of a hand-cranked hurdy-gurdy described?
Question 13. What did Leonard de Quoum's genius tend to lack?
I know. Question 14. What's the name of the dibbler that Rincewind meets in 4X?
Question 15. What is Diamanda's real name? .
Question 16. What name was Mr. Bent born with?
Question 17. Which non-Discworld book received a special limited edition paperback of just 1,000 copies in 2004?
And the last question in this round, question 18. What was the reason for producing the special edition Jason just asked you about? Oh, it's nasty.
It is nasty. And that ends round 1.
We hope you've got 18 answers on your piece of paper. It would be nice if my tongue actually worked in my mouth.
So, of course, what she said.
Yeah. So how'd that go, Mark? Was that right?
It started well and then drifted off towards the end.
Okay. And you didn't get the one at the end, I'm surprised. Okay. Okay.
So are we ready for round 2?
Yes.
Yes?
Okay. This one I've entitled In the Media.
Now, Mark might actually have a chance for these.
In 1995, on an episode of Pebble Mill, Terry was asked what a typical fan is like. How did he answer?
Question 2. Which TV program confused transportation with time travel when talking about the TV adaptation of Johnny and the Bomb? I remember watching that when it happened.
Oh, so did I. It was painful.
It was. Terry was trying to be so polite, but you could see him squirming.
He wanted to slap someone, didn't he?
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay, question 3. Terry appeared on BBC Radio 4's Museum of Curiosity. Who was the curator at the time? And you can earn a bonus point if you can name what Terry donated. I was there for that.
Were you?
Yeah, I was in the audience. Yeah.
I wasn't, and it is a sore point. As anyone who's read the introduction to my book will know.
Question 4. How much did a coffin prop from Sky's adaptation of The Colour of Magic recently sell for on a BBC television programme? And I know many of you know who sold it too.
But that's not.
But that's not the question. How much did it sell for?
Question 5. On the CD From the Discworld, who is credited with playing keyboard? Mark immediately got that one.
Yeah.
If you've read the book, you might have got the answer to that one.
Question 6. Who read the abridged serialization of The Colour of Magic on Radio 4 in 1984?
Question 7. Other than Stephen Briggs and Tony Robinson, name any 2 readers of official English language published Discworld audio books. Not the radio plays.
That was a mouthful.
Yes, it was. That was a hell of a sentence. I think I would have nicely rewritten that one. I can't even speak.
No, you can't speak
Yeah, that too.
And the last question, 7A. What was the name of the Radio 4 programme broadcast at noon on Christmas Day in 2008, where Terry talked about some of his favourite books? You were there for that.
I was there for that, yes. That was the evening after it was recorded in Bath, and afterwards, about 15 of us all went for a curry. We went for curry with Terry. And while we were waiting outside the curry house for Rob to go in and make sure it was okay for us to go in, Terry asked me, so what do you think of this Oing bloke? What do you mean Oing, Terry? Who's Oing? He goes, The bloke writing the books, the Artemis Fowl books. I mean, Owen Colfer. He goes, no, oing. And from then on, forever on, I can't look at those books without thinking, yeah, that's definitely oing.
Oing Koffler.
So there you go. That was Terry's pet name for Owen Colfer was oing. Not a lot of people, well, they do now.
It's quite sweet because we mentioned that to Rob a while back, and Rob went, "Oh yes, he always called him oing."
So there you go. That's our quiz for this evening. So there's a possibility of 33 points.
Ooh.
So
I got some in the first bit. I didn't get any in the second.
So shall we go through and?
Are you ready for the answers?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So.
Round 1.
Question 1 was, in Sorcery, who escaped the snake pit with Rincewind?
And the answer is Nigel the Destroyer.
I mean, hurrah.
Okay.
Do I get an extra point for spelling it right?
No, but...
Because I'm going to need those extra points later.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, you can beg for those later.
Okay.
Question 2. Was an advert for soup was added to the German edition of Sorcery, named the soup brand, and of course it was
Maggie.
It was also in Pyramids, not Sorcery.
Oh no! Well, no. Actually, no, because I have actually linked to it on my answer sheet the picture taken of the book,
and it was Sorcery,
and it's definitely in Sorcery as well.
That's
so
interesting.
Both.
Unless it was in both. I think, yeah. Okay, it might be that Colin's website has misinformed me on that.
I'm going to be honest. Colin's website is missing bits and pieces. I have a copy of his document where we've scribbled stuff in because it's missing.
I can make a copy of this available, the answers available, and it will have the link so you can actually go and see the links.
Well, that is the first error that we can point to my book. We can point at in my book. The first of many that I'm sure I'm going to get letters about.
Okay, so question 3 was, according to Terry, what 2 things are faster than light?
Of course, you would have got a point each for these, and the answer is monarchy and darkness.
And it goes on to go in footnote into great details about queenons and kingons.
Yeah. Of course, question 4. What is the name of the pub in Cable Street?
The current name of the pub is the Axe and Bottle because it's now a dwarf pub, but it was previously known as the Bottle and Stoat when it was a human pub. So if you had either the Axe and Bottle or the Bottle and Stoat, you can have a point for that. Question 5 was, Rincewind and Twoflower communicate in which language?
Any ideas, Mark?
Is it Trob or
Yes.
Troby?
Trob, yes.
Yeah. Hey, from the the language of the Brown Islands, isn't it?
Yes. It wasn't native language to either of them, but it was one they had in common that they could use.
And as many Discworld fans know, there's quite a few Discworld fans from foreign climes, shall we say, who do the same and often will speak in a third language to each other because it's the one they have in common.
Sorry, Mark, I've got to go because I've got to do a radio show with Tony Law, but
enjoy.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Bye, Jess.
Bye.
Okay, question 6. What are the names of the rat catchers of Bad Blintz?
The answers were Blunkett and Spears.
And you get a point for each of those if you've got them both.
Not Blunkett McCain, that's a completely different thing. Yes. Question 7. I completely confused myself there.
You're going off in a mood.
How did Nanny Ogg help her daughter-in-law iron her petticoats?
Well, of course, she sat there and pointed out all the bits she'd missed.
Yeah, that was it.
Things I do to my son when he cleans the counter. It's like, you missed that bit, you missed that bit, you missed that bit.
I've never seen that happen.
Oh, because you're usually working. What did Twoflower call his dragon? Which, of course, is question 7A, and the answer is?
9 reads after his boss.
Yes.
Question 9. In Discworld cartography, What did the acronym MMBU stand for? Any
I can
answer?
see Mark's face is looking.
Miles and miles of bloody Ubervold.
That's the one.
Mr. Neville.
Miles and miles of bloody Ubervold.
That's the one.
Good 10.
Oh, number 10. What is Miss McAlariat's first name?
And the answer is iodine.
Not that pretty a name, is it?
Well, it sounds pretty. It's just
Chlamydia is a far prettier name.
yes. That's a different character. All right. So, oh yes, you asked that one, didn't you? No, question 11. Yes.
Yeah.
What are the names of the 4 boars that pull the Hogfather's sleigh?
I got 3, I think.
Okay. So the answers we were looking for were
Gouger, Rooter, Tusker, Snouter.
Snouter.
Yay! I can see Helen accordingly is waving like crazy, but I know she dressed up as the four balls recently out in the German convention, wasn't it, Helen? Yeah. Okay, so the next one, question 12. How was the sound of a hand-cranked hurdy-gurdy described?
It was described as a cow giving birth. Question 13 was, what did Leonard de Quirm's genius tend to lack? And the answer was?
Naming things. He was crap at naming things. Question 14. What is the name of the dibbler that Rincewind meets in 4 acts?
Of course, it was Fair Go Dibbler.
That was an awful accent. I am so glad Susie Asfelder is not online.
Was there an accent there?
Yes, it was. Sat next to him, there was.
I thought he was just cheerful.
There you go. Question 15 was, what is the...
No, you're jumping.
Am I? No.
No, you're not.
I'm not, actually. What is Diamanda's real name?
What is Diamanda's real name? Oh, Lucy Tockley is the answer. Question 16. What name was Mr. Bent born with?
His name was Charlie Benito.
Now, my brain has just gone. That's the guy out of Masquerade, isn't it?
No.
Making money.
Making money.
No.
Oh, no, you're thinking of
I'm
the opera singer,
yeah,
aren't you?
I'm thinking of the opera singer.
No.
Signor Belisca?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you are right. It's not until somebody says it does my brain just go, yeah, hello.
Okay, so question 17. Which non-Discworld book received a special limited edition paperback of just 1,000 copies in 2004?
Any clues, Mark?
No, this one I was stuck on. I thought it might be Johnny and the Dead because it came out in 1994, but that was a stab, and it would be a 10th anniversary edition, but that was just a stab.
No.
It was Only You Can Save Mankind.
Oh, and I now know the answer to the second one. Based on that.
The next question was, question 18, what was the reason for producing this special edition? And of course, it was produced for the world premiere of the musical at the 2004 Edinburgh Fringe.
Which was the soundtrack you were listening to at the beginning of the call that I had on. Which
I was certain you'd get it. I was certain you were going to get this one.
So they sold of the 1,000 copies. There was 1,000. There's 80 of them sold as unnumbered copies.
Yes,
weren't
there's
they?
1,000 numbered, and then there's 80 unnumbered, untouched copies, of which we own one. Which I had to steal back off one of our other team members because it was sat on his shelf and he'd never touched it. And I was like, I'm having that back. Give it here, Bill.
I lent it to him so he could read it, and 20 years later we got it back.
Yeah, after he hadn't read it. So it was like, right. So round 2.
Okay, well, no, stop a second. So that was the end of round 1. How are we doing on round 1? We could have had 23 points. So anyone get 23 points? Anyone get 22 points? 21?
Do shout in the comments if you get over, because we can't see everybody.
Yeah. 0. 19? 18? 17?
Oh, I think.
Oh, we have a 17.
17. Well,
or are you saying you got 4? No, not me. Somebody. Helen has got a hand up. Helen, you saying you got 17, or are you saying you've got 4?
No, Helen.
She's saying she's got 4. Okay.
We have Andrea got 9 according to the comments on there. So I think
I got 9.
Okay, so 9 seems to be.
I got 15.
Oh, 13.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see that. Right, well done.
Jan Ward's
and
got
Andrew
15.
got 13. So okay, so some of you did quite well.
So
Right.
15 is the current high score.
Okay,
Yes.
so round 2.
You're going to ask me to find the round 2 question.
Yes,
now,
was in the media, wasn't it? Yes, it was.
it
And
was.
I've
I've
now
got it.
confused everything. Right, so
I'm
okay.
just going to do this and throw the other bits of paper away.
In 1995, on an episode of Pebble Mill, Terry was asked what a typical fan is like. How did he answer? Now, his actual line was, a boy called Keith, aged 14, wearing an anorak. Not Kevin, but Keith.
I've got Keith, but I've got 12 years old.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You can have I can't remember how I worked that one out. Oh, okay, but that's fine. You get that one. Because well done on the Keith, because a lot of people thought it was Kevin, but it was actually Keith.
Which is why online, if anybody follows the Facebook groups, whenever a Kevin question is asked, I'm usually the first to jump in and go, but he didn't just call them Kevin, he also referred to them as Keith, Kevin's mum, and to our faces, he called us loonies.
Yeah, it's quite funny actually. On that same interview, he said, "Okay, the person is a boy called Keith, age 14, wearing an anorak." Because, but statistically, it's more likely to be Keith's mum by now.
I had Kevin's mum as my answer.
So, well,
it's just
you can
proof.
have half a point for that one, Mark. There you go.
It's just proof that he didn't always call them Kevins in interviews more than anything.
Right. Question 2.
Question 2. Which TV program confused transportation with time travel when talking about the TV adaptation of Johnny and the Bomb? Of course, it was Blue Peter. And I remember watching Terry squirm in the seat.
Yeah, they sit there and they press the time stuff, and then they end up in this ocean, and then they press it again, and they'd end up in the desert.
They got it totally wrong.
And it had nothing to do with time travel. It was all about teleportation. So they got it just completely got the wrong ends of the stick. So question 3 was, Terry appeared on BBC Radio 4's Museum of Curiosity. Who was the curator at the time? I can't say that word. I shouldn't need that question. Curator. Who was the curator at the time? And the answer was John Richardson.
The lovely John.
Lovely John Richardson, yes. From.
And of course, for an extra point, Terry donated procrastinators.
There you go.
Question 4. How much did the coffin prop from Sky's adaptation of The Colour of Magic recently sell for on a BBC television programme? Well, the answer to that
was £195.
And of course, the person selling it would be known to quite a few Discworld fans as Chris Boot.
You mentioned his name.
Oh, I'm allowed to mention his name.
Okay. On the CD from the Discworld, who is credited with playing keyboards? Mark, you know this one.
It's Rihanna Pratchett.
It is indeed Rihanna Pratchett, yes.
Or 14-year-old propstrel Rihanna Pratchett, as she's referred to in SFX at the time.
Yeah.
Yes, and I did one off, and I picked up my copy and then went and checked it, and yes, it definitely is.
Yes.
So you've got to write that question, so there you go.
Yes, it actually states additional keyboard, in brackets for small gods, Rihanna Pratchett. So yes, it's there.
Okay.
I don't think we can blame her for that, but for that though, it's only a small role.
Oh,
it's a bloody awful album.
It is.
It's really bad.
It is an awful album. The Soul Music album is far, far better.
Yeah, I like that one.
You know. But anyway, question 6. Who read the abridged serialization of The Colour of Magic on Radio 4 in 1984?
And the answer was Nigel Hawthorne.
The great Nigel Hawthorne.
Again, that's another question I picked up from Mark's book.
It's annoying that there's no evidence of that, isn't it? Like there appears to be no recording of it. So it's so rare for something to have been on the radio and it's not on YouTube or anything like that. But
was that during Women's Hour?
No, they were both during Women's Hour.
Oh, okay, it was, yes, okay.
I'm glad you asked that one because I can't remember the name of the person who read Equal Rights. So
good, nor can I. Question 7. Right. Which I've lost. Oh yeah. Other than Stephen Briggs and Tony Robinson, name any 2 readers of official English language published Discworld audio books. That's a hell of a statement.
So you could get a maximum of 2 points, but you could have
Nigel Planer.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a huge list of them. There's Nigel Planer, Celia Emery, Michael Fenton Stevens, who read the Long Earth series and Science of the Discworld, Penelope Keith, who's read Mrs. Bradshaw's, Helen Atkinson Wood, who read out The World of Pooh, Richard Mitchley, who did The Carpet People, Only You Can Save Mankind, Johnny and the Dead, Johnny and the Bomb, Julian Ryan Tutt, who did Dragons at Crumbling Castle, The Witch's Vacuum Cleaner, Father Christmas's Fake Beard, and we expect him to do The Time Travelling Caveman. Martin Jarvis did Good Omens, Catherine Walker did Sea and the Little Fishes.
And that one isn't English language. So.
And the last one is not in English, so I can't tell you what it is because it doesn't count.
No. So there you go. So if you've got any of those, well done, because some of those are slightly more obscure than you might expect.
Have you got the other question?
Yeah, because you threw the bit of paper away, didn't you?
Yes, I know, because I'm a complete muppet. And the last question, what was the name of the Radio 4 programme broadcast at noon on Christmas Day 2008, where Terry talked about some of his favourite books?
And the answer is With Great Pleasure at Christmas. And at that point, Terry's PCA was already beginning to affect him slightly. So he actually had Michael Fenton Stevens and I can't remember her name now, Helen Atkins Wood, read out the bits from the books for him. So he introduced each book and said, this is why I like this book. And then they read the bits for them. So that was a really nice program, and it was on, on Radio 4 at Christmas. So.
But you could have got a maximum of 10 points there. If you want to let us know in the comments, anybody get a full 10?
we had a definite 0 come up there.
0.
2, Andrew.
2, Andrew.
5.5.
Sorry, Jan.
I only got 3.
3. Ah, but you got 18 in total, didn't you?
In total, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well done, Naomi, with 4. Nice to see your face, lovely. I'm now going to do a personal message and say, pick up the phone and ring me at some point, will you?
Sarah got 4. Heather, a consistent perfect 0. Well done, Heather.
There was a time, we were at a Discworld quiz.
Andrea got 4.5.
Andrea got 4.5. That's a good score. We were at a Discworld quiz at the Oxford Story Museum a couple of years back, and they actually awarded a prize for the person who got 100%. He only answered one question, and he got that and put his name on the top of the paper, and they gave him a prize. And it's like, wow, yes. We don't do that here.
That was a quiz we did. Ben Aranovich.
Yes, it was Ben Aranovich.
Ben Aranovich was at the same event as us, and he's a big Terry Pratchett fan. If you've read any of the Rivers of London books, not only does he mention him at the beginning of the books, but there's quite a few references to Terry within the books as well. And they're direct references. Is like he talks about the Unseen University, he talks about all sorts of bits and pieces. So he's a big Terry Pratchett fan. So he's sitting there doing this quiz with us, and they're reading out the answers.
Running the quiz. The quiz was written by Stephen Briggs, not us.
And he was getting really, really frustrated that we knew more answers than he did because he thought he was Terry's biggest fan. So,
he called us all sorts and everything, and even more so when I won.
I'd just like to draw attention because I love it. So in the comments, Andrea as Andrea said, highly recommend Rover of London, which is the Ben Aravich's best book about the dogs of London.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, he's a lovely
just finished
bloke.
Foxglove Summer, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes, they're great books. I've enjoyed them. It's
and they get better actually. I thought the first one was okay, but they as they go along, they get better. I listen to them when I'm running.
It's one of those books. I struggled a lot when Terry died. I found it difficult to pick up a book for a long time afterwards. I lost the mojo for reading for a little while, and Ben Aranovich, the Rivers of London, was some of the books that actually got me back into the habit of actually picking up a book and starting to read again.
I can see why, because they're really easy to read.
Yes,
they're good romps.
Yeah, and because some books are just really, really heavy and take a lot of effort, but they don't take a lot of effort. You just sit in there and you can just read them, and you just involve in them, and it's great. They're very easy read, I think, but they're good fun. So there you go. There's a recommendation. If you want something different to read, then and you haven't already done it,
then read Rover of London.
Yeah, the Rover of London. Yeah. There you go. So
it's about a dependable car.
Oh.
So, how many did you get out of 23 people? Let us know.
Out of 33.
13 and a half.
13 and a half, that's not bad.
It's not bad. I thought it might be worse. 13 and a half I can live with.
Okay.
So, Andrew Neville, king of quizzes, got 15.
I got 18.
And well done.
Jan got 18.
Well done, Jan.
Well done.
We'll contact you later, Jan, and we'll get something in the post to you, won't we?
Yes, we know Jan. As many of you know, we're going to be running a quiz we're looking at running one at the end of August, and then we're going to be looking at doing some interviews online with people like Bernard Pearson and Stephen Briggs, etc. for the future, to keep Discworld events happening online, because of course we don't actually know when we're all going to be able to get together in the same room yet.
Because like today was meant to be in London, wasn't it?
Yes,
or something
we were
originally.
In London with beer and fun and madness. So we're going to do our best to get together online as much as we can as Discworld Monthly. I want to thank you all for coming along. I know Mark is thrilled that everybody turned up, and
so ridiculously grateful I could weep. Honestly, thank you so much. It's been writing this book I don't know if anybody subscribes to my newsletter. I wrote a newsletter today about how emotional it's been to have got to the point today is the official release date. Although because my publisher doesn't seem to be that bothered about release dates, is actually the book kind of came out last week because they had it in. So
I know.
Just suddenly they started throwing them out. But so all I can say for sure is today is the day that it definitely came out on Kindle. But yeah, it's been the end of a very long process, and I'm really grateful for you all to come and join me. I was going to say thanks to my mum because she was on the call, but she seems to have logged off.
Oh, bless.
How many people did you actually get to come? What was the maximum number of attendees at the Zoom?
There was 79 at one point. I saw 79 at one point, but I wasn't taking a lot of notice. I don't know if...
I wrote it down. It was 83.
Oh, well done. Thank you.
Well done.
740 if we're being specific.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Which is about the time I stopped the reading, so that works out quite well. Yeah, they came for the reading. That's all right. I can live with that.
I think it depends how many people were using iPads and stuff like that, and then the batteries started to run out.
Oh, my mum's crops up again. Hi, Mum.
Hello, Mark's mum.
Hello,
she's on holiday. I'm glad she's found some.
Hello, Mark's mum.
Yeah, so as we all know, the Discworld Con next weekend has been cancelled. We are all gutted about it. As I said, we're going to do our best to get everybody online, probably about once a month. Mark is more than welcome to join us whenever he chooses. You know,
I am there. I'm absolutely there.
And of course, as you all know, we are still around. For those of you that don't subscribe to Discworld Monthly, we've been doing this for 23 years, writing about Terrian events and stuff. We're available on discworldmonthly.co.uk. We are a free newsletter. We're not just on Facebook. In fact, we've been around way before Facebook. And of course, I'm loving seeing Love Discworld Monthly catching my eye. It is a canary thing, isn't it? It's a shiny thing in the corner. So do follow us. We will get...
Quick thing, because somebody has asked, what is the album, Steve, you're leaning on? Well, Andrew Murray, I'm glad you asked. This is a copy of The Men Will Not Be Blamed for Nothing's Double Negative, the seminal Victorian-themed hardcore punk rock album that came out in 2018 and appeared on many magazines' Best of the Year lists. I highly recommend it. Available on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify, and all good places where music is found.
Nice plug. Well done, sir.
Wendy O'Leary's just reminded me, of course, in Dublin there is the Pratchett event online. The Pratchett conference normally happens. in September time. Usually it's in person at Trinity College in Dublin, but they're doing it online. There's a whole week of events, I believe, isn't it, Wendy? Just nod at me.
So yeah, because we have our culture event at the same time. But so it's the 17th and 18th of September. There's a Facebook page, the Pratchett Project. I am speaking on your tattoos. So some of you will have your tattoos and quotes, which I have permission for, on the big screen. So it's like a whole 2 days of basically like research into Pratchett, and mine focuses on all of you. So you may see your names and you're like little quotes and stuff. But do register, it's going to be good fun. And then we have the culture night on that evening then as well. So it's all about Pratchett that weekend.
Yeah, they usually combine the two, isn't it? And it should be good fun. Of course, it's free to get tickets on Eventbrite for that.
Yeah.
We will put a reminder about it as Discworld Monthly out tomorrow. So have a look on our Facebook page and you'll be able to get tickets through the Eventbrite link there. I haven't got anything more to say because otherwise I'm going to start like spewing rubbish.
I'd like to thank Jason and Rachel for doing this, because it's like, thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. We were going to do this in person. We were going to have a big room full of people and booze and special guests, and you were going to be there. But alas, didn't happen. But I really appreciate you doing this and cleaning your shelves, especially.
Yes. Mark's had photos of me all day because I took all these shelves apart today and redid them because they were covered in rubbish, and I now have 4 boxes.
I just like looking at their bookshelf because it's like Panini sticker albums. It's like got need.
I'm not sure if I can do this right. Okay, so this is just Pratchett books.
Yeah,
we got other bookshelves elsewhere for other authors, but that's just the Pratchett shelf. So we have a few copies of things. So.
Because, we're weird like that, and there are other Pratchett books elsewhere. I was hoping to get the Good Omens books, because I have a massive stack of Good Omens books. But they're there under my Ditto, and they never made it onto the shelves.
The presence of Neil Gaiman has meant that they do not qualify for the shelf.
They don't. They only half fit. They fit next to the Pratchett shelf. Yeah.
And I'm always aware that I'm going to knock them over, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for doing this, guys, and thank you to everyone for coming. I genuinely, it's lovely for you to spend the evening with us. Thank you to my wife as well, who has sat patiently. Nicoletta, there she's
coming in. She's coming in.
Who has
She's
sat
behind
patiently
you
all the way through this, and who, frankly, I couldn't have done it without. How did you do on the quiz, babe?
0 out of 0.
Nah, you've read my book.
I've also had a bottle of Prosecco.
Fair.
Did you drink it?
I drank the whole thing, yeah.
Well, why not?
So yeah, I guess we're wrapping it up now. But thank you, everybody. It means the world that you came, and please spread the word about the book. If you know it, like, buy it for people as presents. Buy spare copies to prop up table legs. Buy an extra copy just so you've got 2, one for best.
And write reviews and put them on Amazon.
But yeah, honestly, that stuff, like, it honestly does so much good if you put a review on Amazon. It really helps. So all of that kind of thing would be brilliant. And I'm on Twitter if you want to follow me at 20th Century Mark. That's Mark with a C.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you all later, guys. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys. It's lovely seeing everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.